Caro salutis est cardo. 4 words of Latin written around the year 208 in Carthage. The flesh is the hinge of salvation. The flesh, the meat you are sitting in right now. The man who wrote those words was Tertullian, a Carthaginian master of rhetoric steeped in Roman law, a father of the church, one of the men who gave Western Christianity its vocabulary. He wrote them against the most persuasive teachers of his age, the men who said the body is a tomb, and he looked at the thing every mystic of his century was trying to escape and called it the pivot on which salvation turns. Then he went further. The flesh is washed, he wrote, so that the soul may be cleansed. The flesh is anointed, so that the soul may be consecrated. The flesh eats the body and blood of Christ, so that the soul may be filled with God. And he is only the beginning. On this channel we have followed the carriers of fire. Prometheus, hauling the stolen flame down from heaven in a fennel stalk. Lucifer, the morning star, of whom the prophet says, "How art thou fallen from heaven? How art thou cut down to the ground?" The 200 watchers descending in the days of Jared onto the summit of Mount Hermon. The Word made flesh. Different traditions, different names, different prices paid. One repeated motion. Lay the stories side by side and something none of them says out loud comes into focus. No carrier ever hauls it up. In every story we have told on this channel, the fire is delivered in one direction. Down, toward one address. Here, this is an essay about the address, about the one place in the entire mythology of light that every messenger, every falling god, every descending flame has ever been sent. The place the traditions call a prison and keep sealing their treasures inside. The ground you are standing on. We have spent years looking at who carries the light. Tonight we ask the question underneath every one of those essays. Why does the light keep coming here? 3 traditions answer, each in its own tongue. One in Greek, one in Hebrew, one in flesh. The answers rhyme hard. And the third one, before this essay is over, will name the room you sleep in. Start where the Greeks started. Before Zeus, before the Olympians, before the wars in heaven, Hesiod opens the family tree of the gods with a shape rising out of the void. In truth, at first, chaos came to be, but next, wide-bosomed earth, the ever-sure foundation of all the deathless ones. Read that sequence again. Chaos first, and the Greek word names a yawning gap. Then earth, the first thing in existence you could stand on, before the sky, before the light of any god, the ground, and Hesiod gives her a title that should stop you cold, the ever-sure foundation of all the deathless ones. In the Greek, heidos asphales, the seat that cannot be shaken. The immortals themselves stand on her. Then comes the line that inverts the entire cosmology you were raised with. And earth first bore starry heaven equal to herself to cover her on every side. The sky is the child of the ground. Every instinct you carry resists that sentence. We are trained to imagine the divine order descending from above. Heaven first, then the earth beneath it. Matter as the last and lowest rung, the sediment at the bottom of the cosmos. The oldest Greek genealogy runs the other way. The above is born from the below. Every god who will ever hold a thunderbolt or drive a chariot across the sky descends by blood from the soil. When Greeks looked up at the stars, they were looking at Earth's firstborn. And Hesiod adds one more name to the birth record. Among the children Earth bears is Kronos the wily, youngest and most terrible of her children. Kronos, Saturn in his Roman name, the god of limits, of time, of the wall and the scythe. The jailer of the cosmos is the youngest son of the ground. The ground precedes the wall. Whatever the world's prisons are, the floor under them is older, and the floor is not on the jailer's side. The Greeks did not stop at genealogy. They gave the ground a voice. The last play of the Oresteia opens at Delphi, the navel of the world, the most authoritative oracle in the Mediterranean. And Aeschylus gives its first words to the Pythia at prayer. Listen to her order of precedence. First, in this prayer of mine, I give the place of highest honor among the gods to the first prophet, Earth. The first prophet is Earth. Before Apollo ever took the seat at Delphi, the seat belonged to the ground, and the god of light holds it by inheritance from her. And notice what the Greeks did with the ground. They gave it a face and a voice. Gaia is a goddess, never a heap of soil, and that is the testimony this essay is collecting. Where we see dead matter, they saw someone. The first voice of prophecy comes from underfoot, and the sky learns the trade from her. The ground also witnesses. When Homer's heroes swear the great oath before Troy, they call on Zeus, on the sun, on the rivers, and on the earth, because a promise made standing on the ground is made on the record, and the record is under your feet, and the ground feeds. The Homeric hymn to Earth opens with her full title, I will sing of well-founded Earth, mother of all, eldest of all beings. She feeds all creatures that are in the world, eldest of all beings. Everyone starts here, gods included. And when the hymn describes what her favor looks like, notice the currency. Happy is the man whom you delight to honor. His fruitful land is laden with corn. His pastures are covered with cattle, and his house is filled with good things. Grain, cattle, a full house, children dancing in flowers. The hymn does not spiritualize her blessing into a feeling. Her favor is counted in things you can hold, eat, and pass to your children, and the poet closes by asking her without embarrassment for a living. Freely bestow upon me for this my song substance that cheers the heart. So assemble the classical picture before we let anyone deface it. The ground is first formed, unshakable, the mother of the sky itself. She speaks before Apollo speaks. She witnesses what you swear. She feeds what you are. Nothing in the oldest stratum of Greek religion reads the earth as a prison, as sediment, as the far end of the cosmos from God. That reading is coming, and it will be brilliant, and we will give it its full day in court. But it is not original. Underneath it, older than it, stands a different verdict. Rome kept the older verdict alive in ritual. Ovid, cataloguing the festivals, pairs Tellus with Ceres as the mothers of the crops, and splits their offices with a lawyer's precision. One supplies the cause of the harvest, the other the place. Haec praebet causum frugibus, illa locum. Earth is the place, the where of every growth. She does not claim to be the whole cause of what you become. She claims to be the only location where becoming happens. And once a year, on the 15th of April, Rome paid her in kind. At the Forticidia, a cow carrying a calf was offered to Tellus, because, as Ovid explains the rite, the cattle are big with young, and the ground is pregnant with seed, a teeming victim for the teeming earth. The Roman face of the ground is terra mater, the carrying one, a body that bears. Picture the day, a cow heavy with a calf that will never be born, led out in April with the grain still green, and a priest who knows exactly what he is doing. It is an ugly rite, and it was meant to be. The Romans had noticed that the ground gives life out of its own body and never asks first, and they answered in the only currency that matched. You can call that barbaric. Nobody is buying anything here. The ground was treated as a party to an agreement, and agreements get kept in April, whether or not you feel anything that morning. We think we know the hierarchy. Heaven above, dirt below, value descending. Then we open the oldest sources, and the hierarchy is standing on its head. The below comes first. The below gives birth to the above. And into this first formed, speaking, witnessing ground, the sky begins to send things down. Here is an experiment you can run yourself. Take every myth of light you know from any tradition and track the direction of travel. Prometheus does not carry fire up to heaven. Heaven has fire. Heaven is fire's home address. The entire drama, the theft, the fennel stalk, the eagle, the chains on the Caucasus exists because fire had to be moved down. In heaven, the flame is furniture. It becomes a gift, a technology, a civilization, the moment it lands in human hands, on the ground. The most famous theft in mythology is a delivery. The morning star falls. Isaiah's taunt against the king of Babylon gave the Western imagination its most notorious descent. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground? Read the geography of the verse. The fall from heaven does not end in some abstract abyss. It ends at the ground. Even the tradition's greatest catastrophe of pride is written as a landing. The Watchers descend. The Book of Enoch counts them, 200 rebel angels who descended in the days of Jared on the summit of Mount Hermon. They came down for the daughters of men, and they brought contraband, metallurgy, root cutting, the courses of the stars, cosmetics, the arts of war, a second delivery of forbidden knowledge, and a second time the direction is downward, onto a named mountain, onto ground you can stand on today, on the border of Lebanon and Syria. The word descends. The Gospel of John compresses the entire Christian claim into one sentence. And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. We will return to the extraordinary verb hiding in that sentence. For now, just log the vector, the logos, the pattern behind the cosmos, the light that the darkness could not comprehend, moves in one direction, down, into meat, onto the ground. Even the human soul in the Platonic tradition is a descending light. In the Timaeus, the craftsman of the cosmos sews each soul in a star. From the star, the soul comes down into a body prepared for it by the junior gods. The later Platonists drew the flight path in detail. Macrobius describes the soul falling through the planetary spheres one by one, and at each sphere the soul picks up a garment, a faculty, a weight, until it lands fully dressed in matter here. You, in this tradition, are a star that landed. The philosopher Empedocles remembered the landing as trauma. One of his surviving fragments is a single cry. I wept and I wailed when I saw the unfamiliar land. That is incarnation from the inside, the exile's first sight of the foreign shore. You have a version of that cry in you, the first time you woke in a room you had not chosen, the smell of hospital soap, a night in a city that would not answer you. Whatever the fragment meant when it was written, the body still files it under something it already knows. Every one of us, the tradition says, has made that landfall. Nobody remembers the star. Everybody lives on the shore. And the Hermetic books, the Egyptian Greek scriptures of late antiquity, looked at this landed creature and wrote the most vertiginous sentence in ancient religion. Man on earth is God subject to death, not man as worm, man as dust, man as failed spirit. Man as God, in the one place where a God can die. The Hermetists saw exactly what the descent catalogue implies and said it without flinching. The ground is where divinity goes to become mortal, and that transaction, terrifying as it is, runs through one location only. Stack the catalogue and count. Fire, down. The morning star, down, cut to the ground. The watchers, down, onto Hermon. The word, down, into flesh. The soul, down, through the spheres, into a body. Across this whole library of descent, the elevator has one button, and the motives disagree violently. A theft, a punishment, a transgression, a gift. The direction never does. Now ask the question the catalogue forces. If the ground is worthless, why is it the destination of everything precious? At some point, an honest reader stops calling these landings accidents and starts testing a harder word. Deliveries. Something about this address makes it the place where light is sent, not the place light escapes from, the place it is sent to. The traditions themselves rarely say why out loud, but they encode the answer, and the encoding survives in 3 bodies of teaching we are about to open: the prison literature of the Greeks, the palace literature of the Kabbalists, and the incarnation literature of the Christians. The strange thing, the thing this essay exists to show you, is how hard the 3 answers rhyme. But first we have to hear the prosecution. Because the greatest minds of antiquity looked at this same ground and called it a cell. Their case is stronger than you think. It lives inside you, whether you have read them or you haven't. And no honest verdict about the earth can be reached until it is heard in full. Let the prosecution speak. It has earned the floor. This is the most sustained indictment ever drawn up against a place, prosecuted across 1,000 years by some of the most serious minds who ever lived. If you have ever felt that your life is a trap wearing a smile, you already know the case from the inside. Here is where that feeling got its scriptures. Exhibit 1, Plato, Republic, Book 7. Human beings living in an underground den, chained by the legs and by the neck since childhood, able to see nothing except shadows thrown on a wall by a fire behind them. They name the shadows. They give prizes to whoever predicts the shadows best. They have never seen a real thing, a real color, each other, or themselves. It is the most famous image in Western philosophy, and it is an image of where you live. Not of some other benighted people, somewhere else. Glaucon, listening, says, "You have shown me strange prisoners." Socrates answers in 2 words that close every exit, like ourselves. Exhibit 2, the Orphics, older than Plato, whose doctrine he reports in the Cratylus. Their teaching survives in a 2-word pun that is also a metaphysical verdict, soma sema, the body, a tomb. You do not live in your body, the Orphics taught, you are buried in it. The soul is serving a sentence, and the flesh is the cell it was sentenced to. Every appetite is a wall, every pleasure is the sound of the lock turning. Exhibit 3, Plato again, the Phaedo, written in the death cell of his teacher, and here the prison acquires its cruelest mechanism. Each pleasure and pain is a sort of nail which nails and rivets the soul to the body. Read the engineering carefully. The prison does not hold you with suffering alone. It holds you with enjoyment. Every delight drives the nail deeper. The soul is fastened to its cell by the very experiences that make the cell bearable. A prison whose inmates are riveted to the walls by their own favorite moments does not need guards. Exhibit 4, and the prosecution's masterpiece. The Gnostics of the 2nd and 3rd centuries took the cave, the tomb, and the nails, and asked the question Plato never asked out loud: who built this place? Their answer survives in the Apocryphon of John, dug out of the Egyptian sand at Nag Hammadi in 1945. The world it teaches came from hands far below the highest god, a lesser power, Yaltabaoth, blind and arrogant, who did not know what stood above him and boasted that nothing did. The body in this architecture is a counterfeit, cut and stitched by committees of lower powers to hold the spark of light that fell from a world this maker never saw. Even Plato's Timaeus, no Gnostic text, hands them a piece of the architecture. The highest craftsman delegates the making of mortal bodies to junior gods. Read Plato's reason, though, because it is not discussed. Anything shaped by the maker's own hands, he says, would come out equal to the gods, and mortals have to be able to die. The Gnostics kept the delegation and supplied a darker motive for it. The world as a shadow theater, the body as a tomb, pleasure as a rivet. The whole facility designed on the strongest reading by a jailer who calls himself God. And the prosecution has evidence your own life supplies daily. Everything here eats everything else. Everybody fails. Every attachment is a hostage situation with a guaranteed ending. And there is the cost this argument can never wish away. To enter the world is to become losable. To love a body is to begin, quietly, to grieve it. The prison case draws its real power from that wound. Everything you can touch can be taken. The price of incarnation is grief. Put one of them in a room. 2nd century, a city on the Egyptian coast, a woman holding a child through the 3rd night of a fever that will not break. She has already prayed to the God who made the world. By morning she is holding a body. Then a teacher comes through her city saying that the maker of this world is a blind thing who does not know what stands above him, and that the light in her child was never his to keep. That may be the kindest sentence anyone said to her that year. Every argument in this essay has to be strong enough to stand in that room. Otherwise, it is only a comfort for people whose children lived. The Gnostics were not fantasists. They were people who looked at plague, empire, slavery, and death, and refused to call the system good. Their theology is the most honest scream in ancient literature. Say it plainly, as a description of how the world can feel, the prison case has never been beaten. That is why it keeps returning under new names. You have heard it this decade. The simulation hypothesis is the Gnostic architecture with the theology filed off. A fabricated world, a lesser maker, inmates who mistake the render for reality. The internet calls the workplace a cage, the algorithm a warden, the economy a company town. Every generation that wakes up unhappy rediscovers the cave and thinks it found something new. It found something ancient. And yet, before you sign the verdict, go back to the exhibits and read them again, slowly, in the original scenes. Because the prison literature of antiquity holds a fact the scholars have always seen, and the people who quote it almost never do. Every prison text carries its own door. In the same sentence. Return to the cave, and this time read Plato's first sentence like a lawyer instead of a prisoner. Behold, human beings living in an underground den, which has a mouth open towards the light and reaching all along the den. Which has a mouth open towards the light. It is the first thing Plato tells you about the cave. Before the chains, before the shadows, before the fire, he installs the exit. The den is open along its entire length. The light is already reaching in. The architecture of the most famous prison in philosophy includes, as its first listed feature, the way out. Generations have quoted the cave as an image of hopeless confinement. Plato drew a tunnel with one closed end and one open end, and put the open end in the opening line. Then reread the two words that seem to close every exit. Like ourselves. Yes, Socrates locks you into the image, but run the phrase the other direction. If the prisoners are like ourselves, then no one is in the cave as punishment for being worse than someone else. Starting in the dark is the human condition, universal and unshamed. The cave is an address, and an address you were born at is a starting point, whatever else it is. Now watch what Plato does with his own prison in the lines almost nobody quotes. The prison house is the world of sight. The light of the fire is the sun, and you will not misapprehend me, he tells Glaucon, if you interpret the journey upwards to be the ascent of the soul into the intellectual world. The journey upwards. Inside the allegory itself, the cave is not a verdict. It is the first stage of a route. The prisoner is freed, turns his neck, walks up, is blinded by degrees, and finally sees the sun. The prison and the path are one image. Plato built a cell whose entire purpose is the climb out of it. And then the detail that shatters the escapist reading forever. The climb ends with a descent. Those who reach the light, Socrates insists, must be made to descend again among the prisoners in the den, and partake of their labors and honors, whether they are worth having or not. Down again. Back to the cell, back to the shadow-naming contests, back to the people still chained. In Plato's own telling, enlightenment is not emigration. The route runs up to the sun and back down to the ground, and anyone who refuses the return trip has failed the course. The cave has a mouth, and the mouth carries traffic in both directions. Plato still calls it a prison. He built it like a school. Hold both of his words at once. The world of sight is a prison house, and this prison house has a curriculum, a door, and a mandated return to teach in it. Take the Orphic tomb next and read the actual sentence in the Cratylus where Plato reports it. The Orphic poets, Socrates says, gave the body its name with the idea that the soul is undergoing punishment, and they think it has the body as an enclosure to keep it safe, like a prison, and this is, as the name itself denotes, the safe for the soul. Plato is punning across three Greek words: soma, the body; sema, the tomb; sozotai is kept safe. The same syllable, bent three ways, and the third meaning is sitting inside the indictment itself. The enclosure keeps the soul safe. Even the philosophers of the tomb, quoted precisely, describe a strong room. A tomb holds the dead, a safe holds treasure. The difference between those two sentences is the entire argument of this essay, and it is present in the original, inside the most body-hating pun in Greek. Now the Phaedo, the prosecution's own home ground, Socrates on his last day, hours from the hemlock, the one text where world weariness would be forgivable. Here is what he actually says about escape. The doctrine that is taught in secret about this matter, that we men are in a kind of prison and must not set ourselves free or run away. Must not. The word Plato uses for this prison is phroura, and Greek hands it to us with a family of senses: a watch, a garrison, a guard post, a custody. Translators divide, and the printed English settles on a kind of prison, where the Greek can just as well name a watch. On the reading, this essay tests: the body is a post. And be fair to Plato here, he stays suspicious of the body to his last page, and this same dialogue calls philosophy a rehearsal for dying, which is exactly what makes the sentence remarkable. Even here, at his most body-weary, the post may not be deserted. A guard post is not where you are punished, it is where you are stationed, and the one rule of a station is that you do not desert it. On the last day of his life, with every philosophical incentive to bless the exit, Socrates instead forbids it. Picture him sitting up on the edge of the bed, rubbing his leg where the irons have just come off, telling the men in that room that a soldier keeps the watch until the commander calls him home. The body is a post. You keep the post with honor until you are relieved. Line the hinges up and look at them together. The cave has a mouth in its first sentence. The prisoners are everyone, so the cell carries no shame. The prison resolves inside its own allegory into a journey upward. The journey mandates a return to the ground. The tomb, in the original pun, is a safe. The prison of the Phaedo is a guard post that must not be abandoned. Every single text the world haters quote, read whole, contains the countermeasure to world hatred, usually in the same breath. The prison literature of antiquity is a set of climb instructions that history filed under verdicts. And once you see that, the question from the Descent catalogue comes back with new force. The light keeps being delivered to a place the texts call a cell, and the texts that call it a cell keep installing doors in it and forbidding desertion of it. What kind of cell is provisioned like this? What kind of prison receives regular shipments of fire? There is a tradition that answers without blinking. It looked at the lowest rung of the cosmos, the very floor the Greeks put their cave under, and gave it a name no prison has ever had. It called the bottom of the world a kingdom. In the Kabbalah, the Jewish mystical tradition that reached its classical form in medieval Spain and Provence, the cosmos is drawn as a tree of 10 spheres, 10 emanations pouring down from the unknowable God into manifestation. The map runs from Kether, the crown at the summit, down through wisdom, understanding, mercy, severity, beauty, victory, splendor, and foundation. At the very bottom of the tree, 10th and last, farthest from the source, sits the sphere turned toward the created world. Later hands will press it all the way down, onto the dirt, the flesh, the place where you are sitting. Its name is Malkuth. The word means kingdom. The Greeks, at their darkest, named the bottom of the cosmos a cave and a tomb. The Gnostics named it a counterfeit. The Kabbalists, facing the same far edge of creation from God, named it the kingdom. Not the basement, not the exile, the kingdom, the place where sovereignty lands and is exercised, and the tradition stacked royal titles on it like a coronation. The queen, the bride, Matrona. In the old text called the 32 Paths of Wisdom, this lowest sphere bears the title Resplendent Intelligence, with a description that reads like a deliberate paradox: exalted above every head. The bottom of the tree, exalted above every head. Either the mystics had lost their minds, or they knew something about the bottom that the prison literature was built to conceal. Here is what they knew. The 10th sphere carries one more name, and it is the load-bearing one, Shekinah. The word is built on the Hebrew root Shin Kaf Nun, Shakhan, and the root means to settle, to inhabit, to dwell. The Shekinah is the divine presence, God under the aspect of nearness, and the Kabbalah identifies her with Malkuth, the sphere turned toward this world below. The later Hermetic mapping will press her the rest of the way, onto earth and matter itself. Gershom Scholem, the greatest modern scholar of the tradition, judged this identification one of the most consequential ideas Kabbalism ever produced. Read what the equation actually asserts. The material world is not where God is absent. The material world is where God dwells. Matter is the address of the presence. The kingdom is called the kingdom because the king lives there. And Judaism says it in its own voice. In a midrash, the Hasidic masters put at the center of everything. When the Holy One created the world, says the Tanchuma, he longed to have an abode below, just as he had on high. A dwelling in the lower worlds, Dira Bataktonim. The Tanya, the founding book of Chabad, names that longing the purpose of the creation of this world. The lower world is the point of the project. Heaven already had God's address. God wanted one here. And in the Tanya's telling, the dwelling gets built, act, by human hands doing commanded work with ordinary things. Sit on the verb the Midrash chose. It says longed. That is a strange word to use about a God who is supposed to lack nothing, and the rabbis wrote it anyway. Longing is always aimed at something you do not already have. Whatever they meant by it, they were willing to put the completeness of heaven into a sentence where something was missing, and the missing thing was here. There is a plain fact underneath that longing, and you can test it with a lamp. Light that lands on nothing cannot be seen. It needs a surface, an object, something in the way before it becomes visible to anyone at all. A cosmos of pure light would be a cosmos with nothing lit. Now the tradition's one-sentence answers can be laid side by side, and you can hear them rhyme. The Greeks, at their oldest, the ground is the first prophet, and the sky is her child. The Kabbalists, the ground is the dwelling, and the presence settles here. Two source stacks, two languages, no dependence of one on the other, and their verdicts land on the same spot from below. The bottom of the cosmos is a divine address. Traditions that agree on almost nothing else rhyme at the address. Keep that sentence. The third tradition is waiting at the end of it. The Kabbalists then did something the Greeks never did. They put the verdict in arithmetic. Hebrew letters are numbers. Every Hebrew word has a sum. Take Malkuth, Mem Lamed Kaf Vav Tav, and add it. 40, 30, 20, 6, 400. The sum is 496. Take the proper divisors of 496, the whole numbers smaller than it that divide it evenly. There are 9, running from 1 up to 248. Add all 9. The total is 496. The number equals the sum of its own parts. Mathematicians call that a perfect number, and they are almost impossibly rare. 6 is the first, 28 is the second, the third is 496. Euclid gave a construction for them in the Elements 23 centuries ago. The ancients already knew the class was rare, scattered like sanctuaries along the number line. And the gematria of the kingdom, the numerical fingerprint of the sphere of matter, of the dirt, of the bottom of the tree, is the third one. A whole equal to the sum of its parts, a number that lacks nothing. Whether the men who first summed the name knew they had landed on Euclid's third perfection, the record does not say. The arithmetic says it for them. Completion down here is not deficiency. And run the other 9 names of the tree in their standard spellings through the same arithmetic. None of them lands on a perfect number. Of the 10, the kingdom alone is whole in this register. That is a different thing from flawlessness. A perfect number keeps every one of its smaller parts, and they are what make it whole. 1, 2, 4, 8, the little pieces nobody would mistake for a kingdom, all of them counted in the sum. The number is complete because nothing in it was refused. 2 lives of one tradition speak from here on. The medieval Jewish Kabbalists who built the tree, and the Renaissance and Victorian magicians who later drew it into tables and correspondences and handed the West its maps. Each will be named as it speaks. The later tables gave the kingdom its own angel, and the choice is a thesis in itself. The archangel assigned to Malkuth is Sandalphon, and his rabbinic portrait in the Talmud's tractate Hagigah is a single vertical image. An angel who stands on the earth while his head reaches up among the living creatures that bear the throne. Feet in the dirt, head in the highest heaven, one continuous being. The tradition could have assigned the material world a warden. It assigned it a ladder with a name. Leave him standing there a moment, feet in the dust, head among the throne creatures, the distance between earth and heaven measured in a body. and the sphere he governs is painted in the tradition's diagrams like no other. Every higher sphere wears one color, while Malkuth alone is quartered: citrine, olive, russet, and black, the four elements meeting in one world. The bottom of the tree is the only sphere with more than one color in it, because it is the only place where everything above it actually combines. Every power on the map is an ingredient, the ground is the dish. The titles keep going, and every one of them is a door where the prosecution promised a wall. And the gate is old here. 600 years before any Victorian occultist drew a diagram, the Castilian Kabbalist Joseph Gicatilla titled a whole book Gates of Light. In the traditional lists, Malkuth is the gate of prayer, the gate of tears, the gate of justice, the gate of the Garden of Eden. Even with full honesty about how this world feels from inside, the gate of death and the gate of the shadow of death. Count the architecture in that list. The tradition had every opportunity to name the material world a wall, a floor, a pit, an end. It chose every single time a gate. And the occultist Dion Fortune, systematizing the tradition in the 20th century, caught the double hinge in the naming. The womb of the mother is the gate of life, she wrote, and the same door is the gate of death. For birth into the plane of form is death to higher things. One door, read from two sides. From above, entering matter looks like dying. From below, from where you and I are standing, the same door is where every life begins. Earth is the door read from below. Two more strokes complete the Kabbalist picture, and each answers a piece of the Greek prosecution point for point. The nails of the Phaedo, pleasure riveting soul to body, are answered by the oldest line in the tradition's oldest book. The Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Formation, says of the 10 spheres, their end is embedded in their beginning and their beginning in their end, like a flame in a burning coal, the flame in the coal. The summit of the tree is latent in its base. The later Hermetic Kabbalists compressed it to an axiom. Kether is in Malkuth, and Malkuth is in Kether, the crown in the kingdom and the kingdom in the crown. Dion Fortune turned the axiom into a rule of position. Kether, she wrote, is the Malkuth of the unmanifest. Even the crown is somebody's kingdom, the floor of a level above it. So being a Malkuth is a structural position on an endless ladder and never a humiliation. Fire does not visit coal, and it is not nailed there. Fire is what the coal already holds, waiting on one condition. The coal must burn. Matter is not the soul's rivet. Matter is the soul's fuel. And the cave's mouth, the door the prisoners never turn toward, is answered by an absence so elegant it reads as a joke, the tradition made on purpose. Renaissance magic assigned each of the 7 classical planets a magic square, a kamea, a grid of numbers for drawing down that planet's power. Cornelius Agrippa catalogued all 7, Saturn's 3 by 3 through the moon's 9 by 9. Earth gets none. The catalogue simply stops. Agrippa never says why, and the silence invites a structural reading. In the geocentric frame he worked in, Earth is the center, the place the magician stands, the ground all 7 squares are drawn from. You cannot draw down what you are already standing on. On that reading, the Earth is missing from the table the way your own address is missing from your mail. The bottom of the tree then, in the tradition's own words, a kingdom, a queen, a bride, the dwelling of the presence, perfect in its number, a gate in every title, the coal that holds the flame, the ground the magician stands on. One tradition remained, and it took the Kabbalist verdict further than the Kabbalists themselves were willing to go. It said, the presence did not merely dwell in matter the way light dwells in a lamp. It said, "The presence put matter on." The Bible opens its account of matter with a verdict, and the verdict is a scandal to every world hater who ever quoted the book. Sixth day, creation complete, and the text pauses for quality inspection. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Very good. Matter passes inspection in the first chapter, graded by its maker on the record. Whatever went wrong afterward in that story, and plenty does, the substance itself carries the original stamp. The tradition that gave the West its guilt never actually indicts the material. It opens by blessing it. Hold the stamp in hand as we watch what this tradition does next, because what it does next has no parallel anywhere in the ancient world. The Gospel of John, 1st chapter, 14th verse. "And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us." You have heard the sentence so many times it has gone smooth. Put your thumb on the third to last word and press dwelt. The Greek is eskenosen, and it is one of the strangest verb choices in the New Testament because it is built on skenos, a tent. Literally rendered, the verse says, "The Word tabernacled among us," pitched a tent. For a Jewish reader of the 1st century, that verb detonates. The tent is the tabernacle, the portable sanctuary Israel carried through the wilderness, the canvas address where the presence of God camped among a moving people. Many scholars read the echo further and hear, under the Greek verb, the same dwelling root that gives Hebrew the word Shekinah. Take that layer as a reading rather than a proof. The surface sense alone is already the whole argument. The presence that once camped in a tent of skins now camps in skin. Now the descent catalogue completes itself. Fire came down in a stalk. Knowledge came down on a mountain. The soul came down through the spheres. And in the fullest Christian claim, the source itself came down. And the landing site was a body. The direction of the entire library of light followed to its logical end. God, on the ground, in meat with a pulse. This is where Tertullian's 4 words come home. He wrote, "Caro salutis est cardo." The flesh is the hinge of salvation, against teachers who found a body of God embarrassing and tried to dissolve it into appearance, spirit, costume. His answer holds the door of this whole essay. A cardo is a pivot, the pin a door turns on. Remove the hinge and the door is wall. The flesh, said the man from Carthage, is what the door of salvation swings on. Washed so the soul is cleansed, anointed so the soul is consecrated, fed so the soul is filled with God. Every sacrament of his church runs through the body first. Water on skin, oil on skin, bread on the tongue, or a cup held to the mouth of someone too weak to lift it, a hand under an old man's elbow in the bathroom, a mother pressing a clean cloth to a child's split lip. Watch where love has to go to arrive. Every time it goes through a body. His tradition could have built a religion of pure ideas. Instead, it built one you can only join with your body present. And weigh what his testimony is worth in this essay's court. This is the man who demanded to know what Athens has to do with Jerusalem. He would have shown most of tonight's other witnesses the door. The witnesses would not have shared a room. Their testimony still points to one address. Paul had already said it to a port city full of Greek body theory. Your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost. A temple in the 1st century was the one building in the city where a god kept an address. The claim relocates the sanctuary into your ribcage, and the same claim swings the essay's earlier evidence into line. The Kabbalist's kingdom where the presence dwells, the tent verb of John, the temple sentence of Paul. 3 architectures, and this essay stacks them into one assertion. The presence pitches its tent in matter. But the tradition's final word on the ground comes at the end of its book, and almost no one reads the end correctly. Ask an average believer where the story finishes, and they will point up: souls leaving, heaven receiving, earth a burned husk in the rear view. Now open Revelation 21 and watch the actual traffic. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven. Coming down, the city descends, and the voice from the throne announces the ending in the vocabulary we have been tracking for an hour. Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. The tent again, the dwelling again. The closing vision of the Christian Bible is a moving announcement, and God is the one changing address downward to a renewed earth. Behold, I make all things new, says the throne. All things made new. Renovation on site. In the Bible's final vision, nobody evacuates the ground. The ground gets the capital city. One image from that tradition gathers the whole movement, and it is the image I want you to keep. Genesis 28, Jacob alone, in flight, in the desert between Beersheba and Haran, with night coming down. No sanctuary in the scene, no altar, no priest. He takes a stone for a pillow and sleeps on the bare ground. And he dreams, a ladder set up on the earth, its top reaching heaven, the messengers of God ascending and descending on it. Ascending first, notice, in the text's own order, the traffic starts from the ground. Jacob wakes before dawn, and what he says into the dark is the sentence this essay has been walking toward from the first minute. How dreadful is this place? This is none other but the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. This place, a patch of desert with a rock in it. The gate of heaven was under his head all night, and he had used it as a pillow. He raises the stone, pours oil on it, and names the spot Bethel, house of God. The first sanctuary in his story is the ground he slept on, and the discovery is the point. The gate was already there before he saw it, and it is a gate in the exact place he had mistaken for nowhere. The ladder is set up on the earth. Wherever it reaches, that is where it stands. Every truth this strong attracts counterfeiters, and the ground has 5 of them working right now. You have already met the first one. It sells mats. The wellness earth, grounding meditations, earthing mats, barefoot protocols, the entire industry of getting reconnected to the planet's surface for a subscription fee. The industry's case still leans on the same small early cluster. One 2012 review became the flagship receipt, marketed ever since into a product category, on small samples and weak controls. Better studies are beginning to appear, and they are still small and still preliminary. The marketing has always run far ahead of the evidence. Now, the ancients did know a version of the underlying intuition. Greek myth tells of Antaeus, the Libyan wrestler, unbeatable, because every time he touched the earth, his strength returned. Heracles killed him by lifting him off the ground and crushing him in the air. Contact with the ground as strength, being lifted out of it as death. The mechanism is real in the story, and it is a real fact about human beings who do go strange when they live entirely in abstractions, screens, and rooms. But watch what the sources refuse to do with it. Nowhere does the tradition sell contact as a technique. The Homeric hymn's blessing is a relationship with the feeding ground, counted in grain and cattle and kept up by cult and honor, and it can be lost. The wellness earth takes a covenant and repackages it as a purchase. The tell is simple. The true earth gives you something to do, a field, a task, a meal, a repair. The counterfeit sells you something to feel. And watch your tone when you say that, because the person who bought the mat is nobody's fool. They felt, correctly, that they had come loose from something, and they went looking with the only map this culture handed them. The hunger is accurate. The product is what fails them. Every counterfeit in this section is a true appetite sold a false meal, which is exactly why they sell so well. The second counterfeit is the fitness earth, the body as project, optimization stacks, biohacking, the cult of the instrument. It quotes real texts. The temple verse gets printed on gym walls. But read the temple sentence again and notice who the building is for. A temple is honored because of who dwells in it. Polish the stones all you like. A temple with no presence is a mausoleum with good lighting. The tradition honors the body as a dwelling and a hinge, and it never worships the vehicle. The counterfeit mistakes the maintenance of the post for the keeping of the watch. The third counterfeit runs in the opposite direction, and it is the oldest, the hated earth, matter as tomb and only tomb. The Gnostic scream with the hinges filed off. The prosecution had its full day in court, and each exhibit was answered on its own ground. Plato's cave by Plato's mouth and mandated return. The Orphic tomb by its own word for safe. The Gnostic counterfeit by the church that fought it in its own century, with a hinge of flesh and a descending city, though the Gnostics themselves never conceded the point. World hatred survives only on partial quotation. A reader who quotes the nail and omits the post, kept with honor, has stopped doing philosophy and started doing despair with footnotes. The fourth counterfeit is the prosperity earth, abundance as technique, the manifested harvest, the universe as a vending machine that responds to the right inner posture. It quotes the Homeric hymns Happy Man with his laden land and full house, and it quietly deletes the surrounding grammar. The hymn's blessing belongs to a relationship. Happy is the man whom you delight to honor. A person is honored, a technique is executed, and the tradition kept the proof of the difference in its darkest story. Demeter's dreadful year, when the goddess mourned and the ground withheld the seed, and no ritual could force it. A blessing that can be withdrawn was never a mechanism. The prosperity earth sells the harvest without the covenant, and every generation that buys it ends up blaming itself for the winter. And the fifth counterfeit is the flattened earth, the materialist settlement, matter as all there is, the ladder dissolved into metaphor, the whole ascent redescribed as neurons flattering themselves. It presents itself as the grown-up position, the one you land on when the myths wear off. But notice what it shares with the world haters it thinks it opposes. Both agree that matter is mute stuff, and they only argue about whether mute stuff is all there is. The oldest sources refuse the premise itself. The ground speaks first at Delphi. The roots of the world in Empedocles bear the names of gods. The alchemists of all people, the proto-chemists elbow-deep in actual dirt and actual furnaces, wrote that mastery of the element earth brings the ability to give divine service. The people who worked with matter most closely, longest, with the fewest illusions, kept reporting that it hosts something. The flattener's earth has never existed in any tradition that actually touched the ground. It is an office theory. The serious materialisms that let matter organize itself into life and mind are another conversation and another essay. The flattener here is the reflex that waves the ladder away without ever climbing a rung. 5 counterfeits, 1 diagnostic. Every false earth makes the starting place the destination. The wellness earth wants you grounded and going nowhere. The fitness earth wants the vehicle perfected and parked. The prosperity earth would sell you the harvest without the covenant, and the hated earth would have you agree with the sell. The flattened earth just saws the ladder off. First rung. The true earth in every source we have opened, from Hesiod to the Kabbalists to the last page of the Bible, is a starting place with a door in it, and it refuses, structurally in its very titles, to be anyone's terminus. Gate is a load-bearing word. A gate you settle down inside has stopped being a gate. A gate exists to be walked through, and the ground called itself gate in every list of its names. And now the uncomfortable one, because there is a sixth counterfeit, and it sells nothing at all. It is the escape itself, the whole beautiful apparatus of ascent, the practice, the reading, the retreat, the hours spent studying exactly the kind of essay you are watching right now. Every tradition we have opened tonight left a warning about it, and those warnings are the strictest lines any of them wrote. Do not desert the post. Go back down among the prisoners. The dwelling gets built by hands doing ordinary work. The force is entire only when it is converted into earth. Read those again. They are 4 traditions in 4 languages, aiming one sentence at one person. Whoever is trying hardest to leave, that is the person still here at minute 62. That is you. It is me. It is the reason this essay had to be about the ground. There is one more body of testimony to hear, and it comes from the people who interrogated matter directly for centuries with fire, the alchemists. Their reading of earth answers the last question a skeptic should still be holding, which is this: suppose everything so far is granted. The ground is the landing site, the kingdom, the dwelling. Why then does the climb take so long? Why is the soul made to stay, year after year, in the slowest, heaviest, most resistant element of all? If the fire is the point, why bury it in coal? The classical physics of Earth states the problem honestly. Aristotle assigns each element a natural motion, and Earth's motion is downward, absolutely. Earthy things sink to the bottom of all things, and move towards the center. The heavy element, cold and dry, the one that falls through everything else, and in the classical ranking, the humblest of the 4. There is your indictment restated as physics. To be earthy is to sink. But read Aristotle's next clause. Every element moves toward its natural place and rests when it arrives. And Earth's place is the center, not the gutter of the cosmos. The center, the fixed point, everything else is measured from. Its heaviness is a homing instinct. Falling, for Earth is coming home, and the center it comes home to is the still point the whole cosmos is measured from. Plato had already given the same verdict in geometry. Assembling the elements from solids in the Timaeus, he assigns Earth the cube. For of the 4 kinds, Earth is the most immobile. The cube stands. It refuses to roll. It is the only shape you can build on. What the prosecution calls inertia, the sources call foundation. The alchemists inherited this stable, arriving, buildable element and discovered its office in the work. Their art ran on a rhythm they compressed into 3 Latin words: solve et coagula, dissolve and fix. Everything volatile must be fixed. Everything fixed must be dissolved and fixed again, higher. And fixation, the coagular pole, the earth office of the entire art, has a definition in the alchemical literature so precise about the inner life that it reads like a personal accusation. Fixation is the converting of spirit into body so that it can endure the fire and not fly away. So that it can endure the fire and not fly away. There is the answer to the skeptic's question, and there is nothing else in this essay you should memorize ahead of it. Spirit, unfixed, evaporates. Every insight you have ever had at 2 in the morning that was gone by Thursday. Every resolution that dissolved on first contact with a bad week. Every retreat glow, every book high, every conviction that never survived the parking lot. The alchemists had a word for all of it: volatile. Spirit that has never been converted into body, into schedule, into habit, into hands, cannot endure fire, and the world is fire. The ground is where spirit goes to become the kind of thing that lasts. And notice that the emerald tablet contains, in its own verses, the descent catalogue we opened with, compressed to a single circulation. The work, it says, ascends from the earth to heaven, and again descends to the earth, and receives the force of things superior and inferior. There is the whole essay in one alchemical breath: the traffic on Jacob's ladder, the mandated return of Plato's prisoner, the word coming down into a tent of skin. The alchemists knew the pattern so well, they wrote it as a procedure. Whatever rises must come back down to collect its power, because the power is received on the ground, or it is never received at all. Which means the slowness you resent about the earth is the treatment. The soul is kept in the heaviest element the way steel is kept in the forge, because this is the one place dense enough to fix what it is becoming. The Emerald Tablet, the most famous short text in all of alchemy, says it 3 ways in 3 lines. Earth is the nurse of the great work. Matter feeds and raises what heaven begets. The work's force is entire if it be converted into earth. Power becomes complete only when it lands, the exact inversion of every spirituality of escape. And the working method in Isaac Newton's own translation is a line of almost domestic tenderness. Separate the subtle from the gross, sweetly with great industry, sweetly with great industry, patient, gentle, diligent, manual. The tone of a gardener, a nurse, a stonemason. Nothing in the instruction panics, and nothing in it despairs, because the earth office of the work has never been suffering for its own sake. It is the slow fixing of fire into a form that keeps. The farmer's calendar carries the same teaching for anyone who never opens an alchemy book. In the Homeric hymn to Demeter, when the goddess mourns and withholds, the ground would not make the seed sprout. Barrenness, in the classical frame, is a rupture in a relationship. It was never the ground's nature. And when the covenant is repaired, the settlement has a ratio. Persephone below for 1/3 of the year, above with her mother for 2/3. 1/3 down, 2/3 up. Even the myth that owns winter refuses to make winter the truth of the world. The seed's time in the dark is real, bounded and generative. Hidden in the ground's grammar, has never once meant dead. And the same hymn closes at a threshold it refuses to cross. Happy is he among men upon earth, it says, who has seen these mysteries, of the rites themselves, nothing, for they are things no one may pry into or utter. One of the oldest earth cults in Greece names the blessing and keeps the content sealed. The ground can hold a secret. That is half of why the traditions kept trusting it with theirs. The coal, the cube, the fixed spirit, the wintering seed. 4 images, 1 doctrine, and it is the doctrine the fire was delivered for. The light keeps coming here because here is the only place it can be kept. Heaven, whatever else it is the element of the volatile. Everything there is already flame. Only on the ground, in bodies, in days, in kept resolutions and pulled furrows and raised stones, does fire acquire the one property it cannot get at home: permanence. Now put the books down, because the last movement of this essay is about you. You woke up this morning in the only place any of this has ever happened. Not in a diagram of the cosmos, not in a tradition, in a body, in a room, on the ground, with a day in front of you. And if you have watched this far, the odds are high that at some point, this year or this decade, your own life has felt like the cave. The same walls, the same shadows, the same prizes for predicting the shadows, and somewhere behind you, allegedly, a light you have stopped turning around to check for. I want to give you the one diagnostic the sources make possible, because my life is a prison turns out to name several different experiences, and everything depends on which one is yours. Sometimes the sentence means, I am at the beginning, and it is far from where I want to be. The job that pays the rent, while the real work waits. The small apartment, the small town, the small role. The years that feel like a waiting room. The body that is ordinary when you wanted it luminous. That is the cave, and if that is your prison, then everything we have read tonight is your case law. You start where everyone starts. The prisoners are like ourselves. No one is shamed for the address they were born at. The cave has a mouth. Your feeling of confinement is, in the oldest texts we have, the first symptom of a climb that has already begun, because furniture does not resent the room. Only a climber experiences the ground floor as low. But sometimes the sentence means something else. Sometimes it means the walls are closing. The time is running out, the limit is pressing in, and every year there is less. That is a real experience, and it deserves its real name, and its name is Saturn, the god of walls and endings, the youngest son of the ground. And he has his own essay on this channel and will have more. I mark the border for one reason: the despair that says the door is locked, and the despair that says, I have not walked through it yet, feel identical at 3 in the morning, and they are opposites. One is a claim about the world, and the sources we have read all night testify against it. The other is a claim about you, and it is curable, and the cure is not a feeling, and some cells are neither. The clinical, the systemic, the bodily, locks that no turn of a neck opens alone. The texts we have read tonight are not their key, and the honest counsel there is human help sought today, which is itself one concrete thing done on the ground. Because here is what the cave text actually says about how liberation begins, and almost everyone misses it. Plato's prisoner is liberated and compelled suddenly to stand up and turn his neck round and walk and look towards the light. Liberated by whom? The text never says. No jailer is named in the cave, and the rescuer has no face either. Freedom arrives as an interruption from outside the frame, a hand Plato refuses to show. What he does right, in order, is the anatomy: stand up, turn the neck, walk. The ascent of the soul into the intellectual world, the most exalted journey in Western philosophy, begins as 3 physical movements of a body someone else has just unchained. Muscles, vertebrae, feet. Plato, the alleged despiser of matter, wrote the first steps of enlightenment as gross motor function. The interruption is given to you. The walk is yours. And notice who does the holding. In Plato's telling, the ones who would seize and kill the man who came back down to free them are the prisoners themselves. No guards appear in the cave. None are needed. And the freed man's own first instinct, Plato says, is to turn back toward the shadows he can still see comfortably. The security apparatus of the world's oldest prison is the inmates, which has one consequence the despairing reading never faces. Once the chain is off, what stays locked is only the neck that will not turn. The architecture has been open the whole time. The mouth was in the first sentence. So here is the mirror, and be honest at it. Where this year have you been quoting the cave without its mouth? Where have you been reciting the nail, the tomb, the shadows, the algorithm, the economy, the childhood, the diagnosis, and leaving out every single time the door that stands open in the first sentence of your own text? You know your version of the recitation. Everyone's plays in their own voice. The sources do not deny a word of it. The chains are real, the dark is real. The years already spent in it are real and are not returned. The sources deny only the conclusion. They have watched you make the case for the prosecution, and they wait, the way Socrates waited, to ask about the mouth of the den. And they will not let you climb out into fog either, because the texts we have opened tonight keep ending their teaching the same way. On the ground, in the day, with something done. Jacob's response to the gate of heaven was to lift an actual stone and pour actual oil on it before the sun rose. The freed prisoner is marched back down to work among the chained. The emerald tablet's instruction is labor, sweetly, with great industry. The hymn's blessing is a plowed field and a full house. The alchemist's fixation is spirit converted into body, into habit, into the kept resolution that survives Monday. The ground's grammar has one tense, and it is today. So take the diagnostic all the way to its end, and let it become a prescription small enough to be real. If your prison is the starting place, then the interruption has already reached you. You are listening to one right now. What the tradition asks is what comes after the unchaining, the part that stays yours even when it hurts. One movement of the neck today, toward the mouth of the cave. Write the first page, sign up for the class, make the call, clear the desk, walk the mile, plant the seed you have been holding. You do not owe the door a leap, you owe it a turn of the head. And if what you fix today is small, the alchemists would remind you that 496 is built from numbers as small as 1 and lacks nothing. Perfection at the bottom of the tree is completeness of parts, and parts are laid one at a time. One warning travels with the prescription, and the myth of Antaeus carries it. The wrestler was unbeatable while his feet touched the ground, and Heracles broke him in the air. Most of modern life is Heracles. The feed, the forecast, the discourse, the 5-year plan, the comment section, the endless meta-conversation about living that replaces living. Every one of them is a grip that lifts. You have felt the strength drain out of a day spent entirely in abstractions, and you have felt it return from an hour of real work with your hands on real things. That is the mechanism the wellness industry parodies and the sources report straight. Contact with the ground, and the day is load-bearing strength. The climber who despises the ground has volunteered for the one hold that beats him. The seed does not argue with the dark, it splits. Come back one last time to where we started, and look at how far the same 4 words now reach. Caro salutis est cardo. The flesh is the hinge. A hinge is the one part of a door that must stay fixed for anything to swing. The door turns because the hinge holds still. Tradition after tradition tonight turned out to be describing a hinge where we had been taught to see a wall. We followed the carriers down, all of them, the whole catalogue this channel has spent its life on. Prometheus down the mountain with the fennel stalk, the morning star cut down to the ground, 200 watchers onto Hermon, the soul down through the spheres, weeping at the unfamiliar land, the word into a tent of skin. We asked why the light keeps coming here, and the sources answered from 3 directions at once. The Greeks, because the ground is the first prophet and the mother of the sky, the oldest holy thing there is. The Kabbalists, because the bottom of the tree is the kingdom, perfect as 496 is perfect, the coal that holds the flame. The alchemists, because only earth can fix fire into something that endures. The fire came down by every road the catalogue named, as gift and theft, as punishment and exile. But whatever drove it here is where it acquired the power to endure. The fire was sent here because this is where fire keeps, which returns us finally to Jacob, asleep in the desert with his head on a rock, and to the detail in his story I held back until now. When he wakes and cries out that this place is the house of God and the gate of heaven, look at what he does about it. He does not build a tower. He does not begin a pilgrimage to somewhere worthier. He takes the stone he had slept on, the most ordinary object in the story, the thing he had used without looking at it, and stands it upright, and anoints it, and gives the ground a name. The first temple in his story is the pillow. That stone had been cold against his skull all night, and he had used it like furniture. Then he saw it. The same rock, the same patch of dirt. Nothing in the landscape moved except his eyes. The gate of heaven had been under his head the whole time, and morning changed nothing except that he saw it. That stone is this essay. Your bed stands where his stone stood. The room you will stand up in when this video ends, the floor that takes your weight, the day waiting outside the door. That is the unfamiliar land the soul wept at, the den with its mouth open, the kingdom wearing its crown at the bottom of the tree, the guard post, the nurse, the coal. Every ladder in every story we have ever told you is set up on the earth. It has never once been set up anywhere else. None of the carriers spelled it out. Read them together and it surfaces, the secret hiding in plain sight across the whole mythology of fire. And it is the last thing I will say tonight. Heaven has never needed light delivered. You did. And every messenger who ever burned arrived at the same address.